Okay, so we're doing the legislative meeting for the PSD on 8/14 at 12:01. And the biggest part about today's meeting is figuring out if we had something that we wanted to go to CASB with for resolutions. I sent out a few of the ideas and thoughts that we had, and I will pass it to Rob to say if he got some good feedback from our legal services.
Well, I think there are three different topics, right? We got some the question of hiring restrictions for folks who have misdemeanors in certain categories, child abuse, child sexual abuse, those kind of things. For those of you who haven't seen the law, the way it's written now is that if you have a felony in each of those areas, or in any, if you have a felony in a bunch of areas, including child abuse or child sexual abuse, then you are prohibited from being hired, certainly as a licensed educator and also in any other education thing, as I recall. If you have a misdemeanor in some of those categories and some other categories, then the law currently says for licensed folks that you may be denied or I think revoked, if I'm not mistaken, a license if you have a misdemeanor in those areas. Note the difference between shall be denied and may be denied, and that's for licensed staff. For non-licensed staff, there is no comparable may be denied section of the law with regard to misdemeanors. It only talks about what happens with felonies in which is comparable to the license thing, right? So to the extent that we're going to advocate either for ourselves or through CASB for changes to the law in this area, I think the choices, I'll just throw this out there, are twofold, and this is sort of comparable to what Autumn said as well. One of them is we could say that at the very least, and I would certainly say this, at the very least, the description for non-licensed employees ought to be comparable to the one for licensed employees. I see no reason why a misdemeanor child abuse conviction should be sufficient grounds that we may deny a licensed employee, but the law doesn't say we may deny a non-licensed employee. So, I mean, it doesn't prohibit us from denying on the basis of that, but it doesn't provide any support either for denying it. And I think we at least want that similar language for non-licensed employees. We could go so far, both for licensed and non-licensed employees, to say that there are certain misdemeanors. Child abuse would be one of them. Child sexual abuse would be another, presumably, and we'd have to get this itemized, where we are prohibited from hiring staff with those kind of convictions. Autumn seems to feel like that's at least a request we could make. Whether the state attorney general feels that we could go that far in light of federal employment legislation, particularly Title VII, is something that we don't know at this point. So, and the reason that the EEOC laws and the Title VII stuff are there is because some of these things are certainly, in, as we know, in the criminal justice system, there are disproportionate effects in certain populations in terms of the criminal justice system, and we don't want to be we don't want to be discriminating against folks based on, their race or other protected classes. And the question here is, at some level, how do you balance concerns like that against, having even a misdemeanor child abuse in this case, conviction on your record. The law currently, at least the way the law is interpreted to be currently, is if you have that kind of conviction, you are, as an employer, obligated to consider how long ago it was, what the details of the conviction are, how that would apply to the job in question or not, and similar things. In other words, to make a judgment call about it. So I don't know, that's the background. I think there was one other thing that Autumn sent, and I'll look, or said, and I'll look for that unless Kristen can pop it up right. But I don't know. So what does anybody think? I think we ought to take these one at a time, by the way. I think we ought to like do the hiring
Yeah.
thing and then do the accessibility thing and then do the CORA thing. But anyway, so what does anybody think about any of that?
Well, I think it's something to follow through on for sure. As trying to get it for a resolution. Oh, by the way, the deadline has been moved to the 17th at 5 p.m.
Oh, that's good.
For that, for resolutions. But I guess I would feel unprepared without trying to get the Attorney General's input before trying to take it to CASB.
Well, the problem with that, of course, is that's not going to happen before the 17th. The way things
Exactly.
are, the way things are right now with our lobbying and whatnot is that we are, Autumn is preparing a document that she believes would be right to share with our legislators. And one of our legislators has agreed to take that to the Attorney General's office to get their read on what's possible and what's not possible from their perspective, from a legal thing. Like I say, I think I think we're in a difficult position here, because I think at the very least the language ought to be the same for licensed and non-licensed employees. I'd sort of hate to go in with a resolution that says that when in fact we might be able to go stronger, because then that might undermine our position about going stronger. But you know, it's a sort of a judgment call about what can be gotten through. One other thing that Autumn suggests is that we add a legal requirement that all school district employees self-report on felony and misdemeanor charges, and that's for after they're employed, right? As opposed to before they're employed, right? And that it would be basically a crime to not do that, and there will be consequences for that. So again, I don't think that, let me put it the other way. I think that is reasonable to have that in the law as well. So I don't know. There are three choices then. One of them is we sort of defer on this because we don't have an Attorney General's opinion. We go with the sort of minimal solution, if you want to call it that, or minimal proposal. It's not really solution, minimal proposal. Or we go for the whole sort of prohibition based on misdemeanor child abuse or child sexual abuse, and then allow the process to work itself out to back that off if we need to from a legal perspective. Well, if the state needs to from a legal perspective.
Well, is there a way that we can say at minimum we want it to look like be classified, and just as a guideline to say at minimum we want this to happen? I agree that we could do more if it seems like it's going to pass the sniff test, if you will, from the AG and everybody else. But I feel like we can sort of put that clause in there of like, at minimum, do this, and then have an interpret as interpreted by the Colorado Attorney General, and have legislators go from there or something.
I'm okay with that. TJ, you were sort of suggesting we defer, and we haven't heard from you, Jim, so I don't know where you are all at.
I like the full enchilada and back off as necessary based on input from the AG. And so Kristen's proposal seems reasonable of, we want this much, this much as a floor, and based on feedback, we want, the full limitation.
So philosophically, you're in line with prohibiting people with misdemeanor child abuse and we'll just say child abuse and child sexual abuse. There may be a couple others, but as
Yeah.
a representative, you're on board with, if they
Yes.
can do it, prohibiting it legally. Okay.
Yeah.
DJ, where are you at from a tactical point of view and also from a philosophical point of view in the way that we were just talking with Jim?
Well, I believe that we should try to move that way and see whatever the AG can give us
Pull up.
some.
Okay.
Yeah. Technically, I think that if we go, I'm just trying to figure out how to present it and how to try to sell it at CASB. And so then I would think that, saying during our unfortunate experience, we've learned that non-licensed don't have these same ones. We think at a minimum, they should have that. We should have that in writing, and then maybe leave it open-ended there to whatever we get feedback on, we could try to bring up later.
Well, I don't know. When is the meeting where this has to be? I mean, it's one thing to provide the written thing, but when is the meeting where you'd have to sort of do an amendment to yourself if that's what you wanted to do it to approach that?
Yeah, it'd be October.
Okay.
Oh, that give us time.
We
Yeah,
can
that would
hope
give us
that
plenty of time.
well, you don't know how fast the AG's office is going to work, but yeah.
Well, no, but
theoretically.
we can theoretically bug them and say, hey, we really
Yeah.
need this by this date. So
Yeah, October 6th. Yeah.
So I think that I mean, not to steal anybody's thunder here, but I think I could draft I mean, how much do we need to support this, DJ? Because I could certainly draft a couple of sentences that say what we want. That's not the problem. If we got to do a whole rationale thing, I don't know about that.
Yeah, so the rationale helps. Whatever rationale you can put in, that doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be real detailed, but just I think explaining why we think this is important.
Okay.
yeah.
All right. I can try to take a stab at this one over the next day or so and send it out. But essentially, it's going to use some of the at minimum language, and the rationale is going to be generic. It's not going to be specific to our situation, obviously.
Exactly.
I'm not
Yep.
going to get
Yes.
into that.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And
So it's
we have
about
examples of
safety for kids and blah like that, which is all important stuff, no matter. Yeah. So.
And we have examples of previous drafts that we've written that keep it pretty general and give us some wiggle room, if you will, right?
Yeah.
So if we can just sort of draft them off of those.
Okay. And we'll see what Autumn comes up with when she writes the thing for the legislators too, because that may provide some basis for that. Okay, so that's the hiring one. I think that's so. The second one is the accessibility law, and the interesting thing about this one that I learned today, and I think we can get this out to the Jim and DJ too. But I learned today is that the federal government is drafting some rules about accessibility as well. And so there are multiple levels of this, right? So this law was passed in 21 or whatever it was, right? That says by July 24, you have to, hey Jess, you have to meet accessibility requirements, and it has some language around that that's fairly general. Right, over the course of the past couple of years, it's become clear that the law or the accessibility that needs to be supported is that defined by rules by the Office of Information Technology of the state of Colorado with respect to this law now I'm talking about, okay? Those rules have not been promulgated yet. They don't exist, right?
Nope.
We and others have had informal conversations. I don't mean me personally, but the district and others have had informal conversations with the Office of Information Technology, and their response to what the general language in the law means has changed over time. It had at one point been fairly narrow, but more recently, as I understand it, and Kristen knows more about this than I do, it has been more anything that's digital needs to be accessible in some way, right? Needs to be accessible. So that's the current state of the state law. And I would say, for me anyway, just based on the state law, and I'll get into the federal law in a second, but just based on the state law, that is, it's nice that, not nice, that's not sufficiently respectful. It's important that this law was passed in 21, but if the meat or the meaning of the law is still not actually available to people to actually to understand what that actually means in practice yet, and this thing is supposed to be done by 24, and it has quite a lot of impact, not only on our websites, but on our communications internally to staff, on our learning materials, on our curriculum, on our the way it's digital content is the way it's described. A lot of impact hasn't been defined. I think it's not unreasonable, let's put it that way, to at least, again, at a minimum, talk about delaying the required date for implementation of this thing. So that's one piece of this. The other piece is that in parallel with this, and more recently, the federal government the Department of Justice apparently is doing some rulemaking around this same topic. And their preliminary rulemaking, or their proposal, includes some, I'll call them exceptions for lack of a better word. Is more narrowly defined. First of all, is more narrowly defined on what digital content is. And secondly, includes some potential exceptions for school districts, basically. Not that we don't need to meet the needs of our students who are in need of additional support, right? But to the extent that we control the content versus somebody else controls the content, that's one thing. To the extent that it's legacy stuff and there's actually no student in front of us at the minute that requires that accessibility, that might allow some additional time to meet the requirements, those kind of things. I don't know all the specifics, and I only read the material from Autumn, like half an hour ago, so I don't know all the details. But the point is that it's more narrow and it's more defined. So one of the other challenges, I think, or one of the other interesting things, let's put it that way, in this discussion about what we want to say to CASB is there's federal law or federal rulemaking, and the state rulemaking hasn't been done yet. And on that basis, is it more appropriate to wait until the federal rulemaking takes effect? And is that more appropriate? Appropriate is not the right word. Is that more reasonable to adhere to that? Now, I will say that our understanding of the federal rulemaking is that you would have 2 to 3, and this is interesting relative to the state thing, you would have 2 to 3 years after the federal rules are actually in place, which they're not yet. They're proposals, so there's a whole public comment process that has to be gone through to actually implement it. So we would be talking more in the order of 26, maybe 27, when we would be obligated to follow the federal rules, where on the state level, we're obligated to, at least according to current law, we're obligated to follow something that hasn't been fully defined yet by next July. So,
well, I think there's a couple of things there, Rob. I think it's, yes, I think it can be a both and, but the real issue is the implementation by July 1 of 24 without any rules written down as of August 14th, 23. So there's absolutely no way that in 11 months we can follow the rules when the rules haven't even been written. One of the interesting things is that the legislature, as I understand it, the legislature kind of left what technology digital access was to OIT. OIT has described it as it relates to all technology, hardware, software that is both public facing and internal facing, including any technology provided by or procured by a government entity that is used by the public or by a government entity employee. It includes but is not limited to websites, applications, kiosks, digital signage, documents, video, audio, and third-party tools. Just as a heads up, the PSD, just PSD, has over 1,200 different third-party tools, third-party like software that we use. So that's, you know, that's over 1,200 hits right there that we can't control the access that we are given. And we cannot redo 1,200, put out 1,200 RFPs to get those replaced. The work is literally not doable by July 1st. So whether we follow federal guidelines, whether we say, you know, let's hold off on all of this, I think the biggest thing is that this work is not doable, nor do we have any money to do it with, because it's basically an unfunded mandate. You'll hear Kathy say that we were given 10 million, OIT was given 10 million to distribute. None of that money has been distributed except to state agencies. So we're kind of, what I think what we need to talk about is the fact that this is unfunded and that it is virtually impossible to get done by this time from a technological and monetary.
We don't even know what it is.
Well, we don't even know what it is.
And oh, by the way, there are some things that are, I don't know how you make a digital sign in front of a school accessible to someone who's sight impaired. I don't understand how you do that. I guess you have to put out some kind of an audio channel. I don't know exactly.
Well, and this is what begged the question when we were having this meeting. We wanted clarity on what is a product. We wanted clarity on what is it, you know, what is all of this stuff. What is the curing process? What's the remediation process? How do we have any ability to waive and process that? Because they, you know, as we're talking about definitions of digital signage, cities and municipalities are concerned about crosswalks. Does that mean we don't have any more digital crosswalks? Because some of them have auditory, but certainly not all of them. So there's, you know, all the bill pay kiosks that the cities and counties have, you can't use those. Any of the library kiosks that we have, we can't use those. Any, you know, anything that the school might have that dispenses something via kiosk, you cannot use if the kiosk is not considered accessible. So, but as you say, there's still no definition as to what that means. And so how do you do that if it's a third-party vendor who doesn't make something that is accessible? The whole thing is just it's an exercise in frustration is really what it comes to. But I think the ask is to, first of all, remove any monetary punishment for this. So right now it's a $3,500 per, let me see if I can pull that up. And I'm getting this from the Colorado's Office of Information and Technology page, their FAQs. So what happens if a state or local government agency does not comply? A court ordering requiring compliance, monetary damages, attorney's fees, or a statutory fine of $3,500 payable to each plaintiff of each violation. So there have been discussions whether this is each violation of one per product, So if you have a violation on each software implementation, that's basically 35 or 1,200 violations, or is it per person per product? Or is it per person per usage of each product? So for instance, is it simply that we have PDFs up there? Is it anybody who tries to access that PDF? Or is it anybody who tries to access any PDF? So that needs to be defined. I would ask them to remove the statutory fine and the monetary and attorney's fees, the monetary damage and attorney's fees, because at the moment, we're not sure what we're complying to. So I feel like that needs to be dealt with almost immediately. I would actually ask that they change the date of July 1st, 2024 to extend that out, or at least, I don't like the term, but grandfather that in so that we can have an on-ramp of some sort.
Yeah, I think they need to extend the date, and I think we also need to have some language in the resolution around rationalizing the state law with the the state rulemaking with the federal rulemaking on this topic as well. Because we don't want to have them, so we certainly don't want to have them conflicting. I suppose one could be a superset of the other, but we don't want to have them conflicting, and we don't know what the hell's going on yet.
Well, you can have it conflicting because federal always supersedes. So,
well, maybe.
I mean, so in a sense, you can't really do that. But I think whether or not we state in CASB for CASB to say we'd like you to comply with the feds or not, because feds haven't been written either. I'm not sure that that's the most important thing. I think the most important thing is to extend the date, give us an on-ramp, and remove the fines and attorney's fees and monetary damages. Those are the things that I think are going to wallop us.
Well, I think what you had said something earlier too about, that them clarifying exactly what this is what really, the OIT needs to have the rules set, and then we need to have 3 years after that to have the deadline.
I agree.
And so
yeah,
I think that would be my suggestion or approach. I think they need to clarify better the fines, but I wouldn't argue that they shouldn't have fines. I think just the deadline needs to be taken care of, because then it's really a toothless thing in general. But yes, but it is unfunded too, is the other important part of it.
Yeah.
I would go ahead.
I would say I would take out the fines because we don't know what it is that we're dealing with yet. Just as a heads up, apparently Denver has done an evaluation, and also our city of Aurora has done an evaluation. And Denver right now, the city of Denver has figured out that they probably have about 1 billion with a B a liability exposure in this. So this is it's a lot.
Jazz, it looks like you're trying to talk.
Liability exposure, Kristen? Does that mean that people might sue for $1 billion, or does that mean that because they didn't meet the needs of the federal law or the state law that they're paying fines?
From what I'm hearing from the city manager of Fort Collins, there are multiple attorneys in the state of Texas who are lining people up who have disabilities to check out various websites, check out various accessibilities in any municipal school district, library district within Colorado, see what is considered accessible and what is not. They need to sue. The person who needs the accessibility has to sue, and they can sue for $3,500 each time.
Got it.
So just a second, Jill, are you there?
I am here. Hey, Jess, I'm trying to promote you to panelist. So you need to accept that instead of decline, and then I can get you in. So look for.
It looks like she's in now.
She's in as an attendee. Now she's in.
Goes.
Now she's in. Now she's in.
Okay. There you go.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
All right. So I again, at a minimum here, right? And we could, are we all agreed that we at least want the deadline extended after, for some period of time? We have to pick a period of time, maybe, or maybe we don't. We can leave it general. After the OIT rules, and we want the OIT rules to include a robust, we like these words, robust engagement with the stakeholders on a community. I think it's not called community comment. It's called comment period or whatever, robust comment
period.
Yeah, period for the stakeholders to work with them on. And then if you want to say 2 to 3 years after that or whatever, that's fine. But it can't just be we have a robust engagement and then we have another 6 months, because the scale of what we're
that's not
talking
gonna
about is too large. And that's part of the rationale piece that would need to be written around this, is the scale is tremendous and the funding is not there to do it based on our current understanding.
Yeah.
So do I get the sense that there isn't, we'll call it appetite for lack of a better word, among this group to add anything into the resolution around rationalizing with the federal rules on this topic?
I mean, I think we
think
can. I just don't know that I don't know that it's worth anything at the moment because the feds haven't done anything yet.
Well, but
So
that's,
I don't.
yeah.
Yeah.
Jess, you're trying to say something. I know.
You're good. I mean, I feel like maybe we should, if they do have a narrower, something defined, even if it's not fully fleshed out, that still feels like at least something consistent to work with. Whereas this law has been in Colorado or coming without any understanding, and we've been talking about this for a year.
Yep.
So if the federal government is going to potentially have some definition faster at this point, I think it would be wise to say maybe we should consider that as it comes.
So I think this is the same. We've talked about the issues here. If somebody has any philosophical thing about this that they want to get into, let's do that. Otherwise, I think somebody, Kristen, needs to draft a resolution. And the only reason I said Kristen, and you can tell me I'm crazy, is because Kristen is sort of leading the charge for us on this, because she has the perspective not only of the school district but also connections with other municipal organizations who are also concerned about this issue, because it applies to all government agencies.
Yeah, and what I can do is I would include that, include also a request for a curing process, remediation, and an ability to process to waive these things as part of OIT's.
Yeah, I think
delay.
I think at the very least the curing process is not inconsistent with there may be penalties if you flagrantly ignore, et cetera, but so I'd be okay with that.
Okay. And I understand it's a politically hot potato, but what I have written already is that it's not that we fully support the idea and intent of making all digital forms of communication more accessible, but definitely have some clarifying questions and concerns about cost, timing, potential unintended impact as it applies to the enactment on July 1st.
As part of the rationale stuff for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got part of it written already.
That's great. We would, I mean, realistically, in order to be in compliance, we would simply have to shut things down and not use.
And that's the result. That's the concern.
That's the rumor that we're hearing, right? Is that some people who are beginning to understand the consequence of this are just taking things offline. Less transparency, less information sharing and whatever. And you can say, oh, that's a bad thing, but you can't mandate how much information somebody's going to share. So it's a solution. It's a financial solution. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yep. But it definitely would be a chilling effect. I mean, that's what some of them were saying, was that they're going to go to a phone number. You're going to look on the web for the city of Fort Collins, and it's going to be a phone number, and you can call and ask what your question's going to be. So,
All right. So anything
Yeah.
else on this, or should we move on to CORA?
I'm feeling good with this.
All right.
Yeah.
So the deal with CORA is the following. We started sharing some of our concerns with our legislators last session, or even before last session, right? There was some concern about how amending the CORA laws would be perceived as it relates to being transparent and communicative with our community and our constituency. And of course, CORA applies to all government agencies, not just school districts. So this is not somehow school district or PSD specific. So there was some concern about that. However, over the course of the last year or so, and based on some conversations that we've had recently with some of our legislators, there appears to be more appetite to make some amendments to CORA to address some of the, we'll call them fishing expeditions, or that are happening, plus the costs associated with responding to these things not being consistent with the charges that we're able to charge people, right? Because the way the law is currently written is the first hour or so is free of labor, right? And some people in our own district, not employees of our district, but people who are doing CORAs against with our district, are tailoring their requests so that it takes an hour to do, or a limited amount of time, and then they come next week with another request that takes another hour or whatever. And so through serial application of the law, they are avoiding any charges at all, let alone the charges that account for the employee that, the risk management employee who's working on this a lot of her time, not to mention the attorney or the legal staff that has to review most of these things in order to ensure that we are only releasing things that we are legally able to release. Because some of these requests have been, give us any email that has this keyword in it, right? Which, first of all, takes a long time to sort through. And secondly, you have to make sure that anything that needs to be redacted out of those emails, from a personnel perspective or some other things, needs to be done, right? And so that all takes time and money and energy and all that, right? So the question is, what might we submit to, given that there is some interest in doing this, I think among some of the legislators at least, what might we submit to CASB that would be supportive of that? I'm not sure how to approach this, because I don't want to reveal any confidences here either. So I think, yeah. Thoughts, Kristen? Or anybody else for that matter? I mean, we could certainly do a resolution that talks about making the costs more consistent with the actual, making the charges more consistent with the actual costs of doing the work. We could submit something that talks about I'm
wondering if,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, no, speak
Sorry.
up, because I'm struggling with what to say next, frankly, because
Well, I'm wondering if we can do two things on this one. One is essentially leave the press out of it. So make a statement that says this would not affect the press access to immediate and important information that they deem necessary for their stories or whatever. Somehow what I want to get across is we need to stop phishing attempts.
That's what I'm struggling with how to
Yeah.
phrase.
And so, but I think if we can put in there, but I think if we put directly in there that this basically is null and void for the press, because that's going to be, I think, the part that people are very concerned about, particularly the press would be concerned about that. And I don't want to make anything look like we're trying to hide from the sunshine laws. It's just we're trying to figure out how to stop these phishing attempts.
The last time that this was brought up, though, it was really hard to try to define press.
Press. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem
Yeah.
because if I've got a blog, am I the press?
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem we have.
That's hard.
Because I think the people that we're concerned about doing fishing expeditions will immediately become press, is what I think is going to happen.
Right.
You're
Is there a
breaking
way
up
to
some,
limit-
Jess.
Well,
I'm not
and-
sure.
Go ahead,
ahead.
Jess.
Yeah, I have like a random thought though too, is because you have to redact so much information and it does take so much time, like we're also then held responsible if we fail to do that. So from a legal perspective, like this becomes a nightmare the more it's used, because people get burnt out on having
Yep.
to just go through email after email after email. And we're human. Somebody's going to make a mistake, and it's going to be, then we have a different problem where we've released information that we are not legally allowed to release because people are phishing. Like, I think this opens us up to more than just like, this is time consuming. It's also, I think it opens us up to massive potential of legal nightmares, and not just us, any entity.
So there's a possibility of putting some of that thought into a rationale statement. The question is,
Yeah.
what do we? Jim, you were going to say something. Sorry, I should let.
Well, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
This is the first I've heard that we charge beyond an hour. I guess I'd like to learn more about that sometime. But the solution I was kicking around was, is there a frequency? You get 10 a year, or something for a year, or I like the 4 a year number, I think, and you just don't get more than that, right? And so would that?
Well, we tried.
That?
So we tried a variation of that where we say, if you have more than I'm going to get the numbers wrong here, so don't hold me to the specifics. But the idea was, if you put in more than one request in a week, we combine all those requests, and that's how we charge, right? So if the combination of those is more than an hour, then you get charged the hourly rate after that, right? But like I said, what they've just done then is they just wait until next week, and then they put in their next request, right? So that's different from what you're saying. You're saying you only get 4 a school year or whatever, a calendar year, or however you want to define that. I think that's, I think you need to combine that with, you get 4 a year where the first hour is free, and then after that you get charged more. Maybe there's some sliding scale of charges. That's another possibility. But yeah, I think it's gonna, I don't see any good way to define what phishing is. I mean, it's sort of one of those things where at least we feel, or I feel like I see it, like I know it when I see it. but to make a law that defines what phishing is going to be hard. So I'm not sure that we have much beyond a financial disincentive that we could easily define. Now, it could be that others are thinking other things, and I don't know the answer to that yet.
I mean, do we have a lawyer who could Autumn do a search amongst laws? Because I doubt phishing has never been defined, right? I bet somebody somewhere has had to, it's like defamatory, right? Like
Yeah.
somebody's trying to attack us, and there are laws to protect people, at least, from just superfluous attacks, right? Like there has to be some kind of vocabulary to be able to define that. So
Well, there has been some analysis. Autumn has done some analysis of this and has made some has done some analysis about this. Again, I think we're in a place here where somebody needs to write something down that then we can go with based on whatever analysis we've, however we feel about it.
I'm wondering too if we can go ahead. One of the things we talked about last time was if the records are over, or there are a large amount of records that they're requesting, that they had 10 days, and we were asking for longer than that.
Yeah.
So we were asking for more like 30 days in order to get those back. Because 10 days, the problems we were running to at 10 days is it's 10 working days, but that includes if you have your one person is on a 10-day vacation.
Well, it's actually 3 days. It's not 10 days. So it's
no,
worse than that.
in cases, no, in requests that involves many records.
Yeah,
then
it's fine.
You can get up to 10 days, but you have
to.
And even then, you have to say, I need 10 days. You have to actually provide a request for that.
So there is
I would
time,
love to see a time change.
So there's time extension and money and cost charges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the time turnaround was my big one. As I thought the 3-day turnaround was just as much as we're getting in, it requires us to have other personnel, basically. And so,
and that's part of the rationale. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that to me is if it's people doing these phishing things constantly, then there's got to be a way to try to either bump them down on the priority scale or tell them that it's going to take more than 3 days. If it's somebody that's constantly just doing that, I don't know. Yeah.
So I think there are several ideas here, and I might be able to toss a couple other ideas to whoever's willing to write this up. Does anybody want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, I think that distributes the work a little. All right, so those are the 3 major topics. I mean, I forget all the other things on our legislative agenda, but those are sort of the newish ones.
Yeah, the last one I had was the new teacher mentoring program. That was a grant program, and I was going to be extremely bold and say that that I would support it not being a grant program, that it would be a yearly funded program calculated on an average of the last 3 years of your district's hiring licensed staff and adjusted yearly.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
By making this commitment, Colorado will improve its teacher retention and giving our students a better learning experience.
Sounds like DJ's written something already.
Yeah.
Right. That sounds good.
I think that's terrific. And if they have to back off of it, then fine. But at least they know it's an important thing that's made a big difference for our teachers. We heard about that some time ago. So.
All right. Does anyone else have anything else that was?
If I share a draft with y'all, this week, this is due the 17th, you said?
Yep.
So if I share a draft this evening, can we do comments in the document?
That works for me.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. I will do that then. I will make sure I send it so that people can make comments in it. and try and
Yeah.
get it done that way.
And I would say DJ and I probably ought to do likewise.
Okay.
Then the other aspects, if we're ready to move on, is meetings throughout this year. Jill is going to be the one running the Zoom aspect. So if we need to do it that way, if there was any thoughts or concerns about or suggestions about what day and when to have them.
This time works for me. I don't know if it works for anybody else, but
I like Mondays because on Fridays is when CASB does theirs. So then I'm either can bring stuff from that or
I'm good with
bring
this.
stuff.
I'm good with this time and day.
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right. And then I think again for when we get closer to the actual session, I think then we'll have our regular meetings. But until then, do you want to set up like a once a month thing, or
I think once
even
a
more?
month once a month makes sense, absent.
yeah,
And I think we ought to invite Ann to those.
Yep.
Jim Ann is our lobbyist. Ann Barkus is our lobbyist.
All right. I will send I will get that set up then for Mondays at noon once a month.
sounds good.
And then before the election, the one topic that we should probably talk about is endorsing some of the ballot measures. HH is out there and a little confusing. So I'm having a little nervousness about that it gets picked up, but it's the property tax one, and the other people are trying to gather signatures to put something on the ballot for 2024, which is to me is a scary one. It's a hard
So the
cap.
4%.
Yeah. And so that one would be devastating for everything, not just education in Colorado. If we don't find it by doing that, and not having another way to fund these organizations or these districts and stuff. So I think HH is a decent compromise, but it's going to be, I'm a little bit worried about how they're trying to sell it and promote it. And the stuff's just starting to come out now to try to build up for the election. But I think we need to probably read that and discuss it a little bit and then take a vote on that one. There's also II, which is they want to go back and get a little bit of the money they left on the table with funding universal pre-K. I think it's like $26 million. It's not a whole lot, but the way that they wrote it last time left that money out there, and obviously it is not funded well enough. So that's also going to be on the ballot.
Yeah, on HH, that's an interesting one because, I read an editorial in the Denver Post, and it was someone against, right? And they were saying, oh, you're just trying to work around Tabor, and I did the analysis for my finances, and I'd save 100 or save 200 of my, right? And I don't know whether to believe their numbers or not, right? It's an editorial, so who knows? But that was a pretty
that number sounds a little off.
I don't know. Article big against, and then I hear Dave Montoya talk about it, and he says, I just don't know yet, because he in the audit committee last week he talked about, I've talked with the assessor's office, and I'm just still trying to figure this thing out. I don't know how this is going to go for us, so it's pretty interesting.
So do you want to get us something to look at, DJ, before the next one of these meetings? Because I think there's 2 stages to this, right? Do we want to have this? I mean, they don't have to be 2 stages, but I think what you want, if I'm understanding you correctly, DJ, is to have the board, not just this subcommittee, but the board vote on, presumably from your perspective, an endorsement of HH, right? But somehow we need to get from here to there, right? So we
Correct.
need to do some education of the board members before we have a meeting about it, or before we put it on an agenda. And Jim raises a good point that if Dave isn't at some level, Dave is our educator, is our sort of impartial educator, about to say what the impact is going to be on the district, to be able to have us have a meaningful conversation and vote about it, I think.
Right.
I think the trickiest part on that is it's going to be for school districts, it is going to be very minimal of a negative impact because of how the backfill system works.
Well, you hope, assuming that the state actually doesn't just increase the negative factor as a result of not having enough money to do all that backfilling.
Yeah. Well, yes, and the 1% growth is really the best thing about the whole, that we grow our cap is to me that's the best thing about HH in general. But my personal concerns are some of the other districts and how it's done. So an example is
the library district.
Well, actually, no, not that one as much, because they're not going to be growing as much. Well, I guess maybe
we're
they
trying
would,
to build
because
a 3rd and 4th building. Yeah.
but depending on how much our property tax goes up, they could not. The formula is that they don't backfill all of those as much, because they're thinking we're growing, our property tax is growing so much, backfill it because we're still going to get in a lot of money. So those other districts are what make me a little nervous about it. And but if I just put on my school district hat, it's a good way to address the property tax problem and not have people go to that hard cap, or people want to go to that hard cap next year. So yeah, I think it is going to take some discussion and thought and look at, but it's a tough one for school districts, because I mean they made it really attractive for us, and I worry about the other ones.
Well, so can I assume then that, DJ, you'll work with Montoya to get us to a place where we can put this on the agenda, and that you'll let Kristen and I know when it's ripe to put on the agenda? Because I just don't, and probably obviously it needs to be in September, right? If it's too much later than that, it isn't going to matter. But
Exactly.
but we'll look for your guidance on that.
Okay. All right. Well, that is all I have got. Anyone else have anything for the good?
Nope.
That's it.
All right.
All right,
well,
cool.
Thanks for getting together quickly, and let's try to get our drafts turned around.
Thank you.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you.
All right.
Can
Thank
we,
you.
hey
Thank you.
DJ, can we have a
Yep.
close time stated by you, please?
Yeah. It is 1 p.m. on Monday the 14th.
Still.